guys, this is Christy, also known as Enoshima Cosplay. I'll be appearing at the Melbourne Toy and Comic Con on October 21st. I'll be helping out at the Tin Universe table, so make sure you stop by. We can talk about cosplay, we can take some photos, and you can even purchase a print from me if you'd like. There's also going to be a Naruto themed giveaway if you're interested. So I hope to see you there.
Welcome to Shortlisted, the podcast where we take a top 10 list from the internet and talk about it for 60 minutes. We just set a timer, talk for an hour, and then shut up, whether or not we've made it through the list.
So, Eryn, what have you been up to?
I have moved. I have moved from Virginia to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and yeah, big adventure. How about you?
Going to school, working too much, doing too many projects.
Yeah, so basically we both have all the time in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
We could probably do like a top 10 of reasons why we haven't recorded the past few months.
Yes. Well, I was trying to figure it out today when we were talking about which one we were going to record because you made this lovely schedule and now
And then we
we've
never
skipped
kept to it.
I know. So that's all right. We're back on track now.
Yeah. Like we had moving, travel.
Mm-hmm.
I think I fell asleep like twice when we were supposed to record.
I feel like there was some illness in there at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a rough go.
And you've like had some changes on your podcast, haven't you?
Yeah, so we had Jordan is taking a break of an undefined time, which might be she'll come on occasionally and say hey. And so now I have Diana Seacon as my new co-host, who was a fan and then a Patreon supporter, and then now my co-host.
Cool.
So that is awesome. And actually, we've got some more exciting podcast related news, but we can't say anything until September. But then we're gonna have some additional changes that are gonna be great.
Oh, that'll be really cool.
Yeah.
So the jump in, which list we on?
I believe we're doing top 10 writers who disowned their work.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, good. No surprises then. I just realized that I spent the entire first part of this conversation trying to log into Facebook because that's what I was doing when you called, because I was going to let you know that I was ready. And so I just now got logged into Facebook and realized that the whole point was to tell you I was ready and we're already talking. This might be a rough recording, Brian.
Oh, believe me, no, I know I've been working like 12-hour shifts every day.
That's insane. Is it boiling hot there?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is surprisingly boiling hot here. Like 90s and 70% humidity, and just, I did not do my research about Minnesota summers because they feel like Virginia summers.
Yeah, I had to go to Colorado for training. Not Colorado. I don't know why I said Colorado. I went to Kansas for a training a couple months ago, and I was expecting it to be at least a little bit cooler than here, and it turned out to be really hot.
Yeah, the whole world is boiling.
Yeah, that's about true.
Yeah, certainly feels like it.
So, top 10 writers who disown their work.
Yes, we ready?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to read the introduction. This is on top10s.net and written by Drew Anderson. It says, for most writers, there's a feeling of catharsis that accompanies having a book published. You had something to say, and now it's out there for the world to view. It may become a bestseller, or it might move 5 copies, all to your mom, but either way, you created something meaningful. Your high school classmates were wrong about you, just like you always knew. But sometimes that euphoric feeling doesn't last. Sometimes it turns to downright loathing. Here are 10 writers who hated, hid, or simply pretended books they wrote didn't exist. Number 10, Ian Fleming, The Spy Who Loved Me. 1961-62 was a good time to be Ian Fleming. His James Bond novels were consistent bestsellers. Production had begun on the first Bond film, Dr. No. Despite all this, Fleming wasn't happy after learning his adult thrillers were increasingly being read by school children who idolized James Bond. So he resolved to write a book showing his famous spy from the other end of the gun barrel, a sort of cautionary tale about a civilian who gets caught up in Bond's world. The result was The Spy Who Loved Me, told from the perspective of an ordinary woman, Vivian Michelle, who chronicles such espionage staples as losing her virginity in a movie theater, becoming a secretary, aborting her boss's baby, and managing a failing motel until mobsters try to torch it and her for the insurance money. Bond himself doesn't appear until two-thirds of the way into the book to dispatch the thugs, seduce Vivian, and leave before the final chapter. Whatever Fleming was going for, it didn't work. Critics panned the new Bond novel in spite of ultra-progressive dialogue as all women's love semi-rape. They loved to be taken. It was his sweet brutality against my bruised body that had made his act of love so piercingly beautiful. Reviews were not so piercingly beautiful, and Fleming, stung, declared the experiment a failure and requested that no paperback version or hardcover reprints be issued. The next novel proceeds as if The Spy Who Loved Me never happened, and Fleming would only allow the title to be used for a movie if it had nothing to do with the book's plot. For all that, it did give us one lasting contribution to the Bond canon: horror, a gangster with steel-capped teeth who inspired the infamous film henchman Jaws.
First, have you read an Ian Fleming novel?
I have not. I have seen some James Bond, but no.
The novel, like, when I was little, my dad loved James Bond movies, so we is one of the things we bonded on was like James Bond movies. But the novels are totally different. Like, he's not a hero at all in any way in the books, in a lot of ways. But they're also very dry, like dry.
Really?
Yeah, like they're very like the writing style is very. It's it's technically alright, I guess, but it's like there's nothing exciting. It doesn't get you in. Like he literally in like I think it's the very first one spends like 2 chapters telling you how to play a certain card game.
What on earth? That's nothing like a James Bond movie.
Yeah, yeah. It's like they're not very good at all and stuff. But like Bond's weird like in some ways like yeah, because like you also have the movie rights, which were weird and tied up, and some of them don't count, and it's like they're all weirded out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because like I don't know if you know the story. Like when Sean Connery left, he had one more contract to do a movie, so then Roger Moore took over, and then somebody bought the rights to that contracted movie, so they made 2 Bond movies that were basically the same movie around the same time.
Okay.
But Sean Connery was older at the time, so it's kind of a weird like thing with the Bond movies.
Right.
And,
Huh. I really don't know much about them at all either. Like I have seen a couple. I think was Pierce Brosnan Bond.
yeah,
Okay, that's the one I've seen.
yeah. There's been like Sean Connery, Roger Moore, George Lazenby did it for one movie. That's more famous because Diana Rigg from the Avengers was in it than anything.
Right.
Let's see, who was after Roger Moore? Oh, Timothy Dalton, and then Pierce Brosnan, and then Daniel Craig. And I guess they're saying the rumor is Idris Elba might be the next Bond.
Interesting.
So like, yeah.
So do you watch a lot of Bond? Is that something that you are into, or?
Yeah, I tend to like watch them because like I said, the connection with my dad. So I tend to watch them.
Right.
As a writer, like looking at like stuff you like, I think writers though like you could say it about almost everything they write in a way.
Yeah.
Because like you look back at books and say like people ask me like, is there stuff you don't like that you've written? Like I'm like, yeah, tons of it. And there's stuff I don't even agree with at the time I wrote like years ago and stuff
Right.
like that. But I think
Right.
just totally getting rid of it, you don't learn the lesson from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
So like even
I
yeah, go ahead.
what's that?
Like even like my stuff, which is all ebooks and stuff. Like people are like, well, why
Uh-huh.
don't you go back and edit everything to it? And it's like, well, that's that. I moved on from that. Lesson learned.
Right. That was a writing practice. Now I'm doing something different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done several National Novel Writing Month challenges where I've written. I mean, I guess they're novels. I don't. They aren't even like proofread or anything because that's like sprint writing. So
Yeah.
you're not planning. You're not doing any of that kind of stuff. And I'm very proud to have finished them and to have written that many words and told a complete story. But they're absolute shit. Like I would not anyone read them. I printed a copy of each one, and they are in my house, but they are hidden. Just because I want to, like those were my words. I did that work. I want to see it as a book, but that's it. It doesn't get to see the light of day.
Yeah, I did. Like the NaNoWriMo. Like I did it for like 6 years straight. Like,
Yeah.
and I loved it. It's like a lot of fun. Like you
Yes.
write that book and you like, and of course it's not like a publishable novel. Like you can't write a book that quick and that many words without being publishable. It's not that hard to do, but it's fun to do.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was much more successful at it when I was still teaching English because I would incorporate it into my class. Like we would have writing time every day, and I would use that time to write. And so it was sort of double duty. I was modeling being a writer while also making some progress on my personal challenge, which was super nice. Now it is much harder to incorporate into my day. It seems I've gotten busy. But yeah, it's a great thing. And I love that there are some books that have come out of NaNoWriMo that are now published books. Like Rainbow Rowell has one, and there was one about an elephant or something like that. That was pretty big in our middle school for a while. But I just think that's very cool. Like I am sure that what they wrote in November looked nothing like what they ended up publishing. But it's cool that that's how they started.
Yeah, I stopped doing it just because I didn't have like I got so many other projects and stuff like,
Yeah.
and I usually work on one book a year, so that's my book I work on, and the rest of the stuff like it takes up a lot of time. John Green, the
Yeah.
writer. Do you know who John Green is, the writer?
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
he did one year, and he released it that raw book. Like you can
Oh,
find it
wow.
online where he put it out. I think it's like a zombie book or something like that. He just wrote like one draft all the way through, and then released it without.
That's scary, but also awesome.
I know a lot of people do now is they do the live writing where you can like you stream it while you write.
Oh, wow. So, like, actually, as you're writing, not just like a daily chunk?
Yeah, like I've thought about like I gotta figure out I actually have the program on my computer to do it, but I just gotta figure out how to use it. But it's like you can stream it. Basically, streams your Word file right there as you're writing
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
it.
I'm not up for that. I would be happy to do an anonymous, like, here's what I wrote today kind of thing. But also, I don't know that my live writing would make a whole lot of sense because with NaNoWriMo, one of the things I've always done is if I start to get in a rut, I'll skip to another part that I have thought about, and so I don't even write it in order. Like you wouldn't. It's not a continuous story until I put it back in order. I don't know,
I
but no,
think it,
I wouldn't want anyone to watch me write.
I think that would
Sounds
be
awful.
I think that would be interesting if you were watching someone who was well known or something like that, and you could see
Yes.
what they do. But besides, like a normal person, like any other person, I don't think it would be as interesting to watch them do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would watch like J.K. Rowling do it. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. You'd be like,
I have a little obsession in that area, though, as we know.
you'd be like, can I make this thing like look around her house?
Right. Can I just watch you write? Like, I'll sit behind you and I won't talk, I swear, and if you want tea, I'm on it.
before we get on Harry Potter, we'll move on to our next book.
Right. Yes. Rowling is not on this list. I just want to point that out. But this one surprised me because number 9 is Stephen King. But he was writing as Richard Bachman, and the book is Rage. It says it's easy to make fun of Stephen King these days for the sheer volume of his body of work and some of the more, well, hokey concepts like killer trucks. Really, Stephen? But it's also easy to forget how many of his books, especially the early ones, were genuinely terrifying and in one instance tragically prescient. The first novel King ever wrote, Rage, tells the story of a high schooler who brings a gun to school, kills 2 teachers, and holds his class hostage, only for them to begin empathizing with him in a creepy Tyler Durden-esque fashion. The reason for this book's censorship is unfortunately obvious after a spate of school shootings in recent years. A novel told from the perspective of the killer isn't something King wants serving as possible inspiration. At least one real-life shooter was reported to have had a copy of Rage in his locker, so King and his publishers jointly agreed not to publish any future editions. Considering he wrote the story when he was still in college, he's probably just lucky that he didn't get flagged as a potential risk case himself by school administrators.
This book's the reason why I wanted to do this list.
Yeah.
Because this actually got me in trouble in college for talking about this in a classroom.
Yeah.
Because a teacher brought it up, and the professor was wanting to discuss how writers should be responsible for what they wrote. And that, okay, I was a college student, and as we know, all college students know everything, okay?
Everything, yes.
So, but I got really mad about it, and I was like, one, I think he's a coward for getting rid of the book or disavowing it. I was like, you gotta be firm, you gotta own it or whatever.
Yeah,
and I was like,
you did.
And the teacher was like, well, what if my kids get something and they go do something? And then I, of course, being a smart ass, was like, well, I didn't take your kids to raise. And it caused a big stir in the classroom. So, like, this has always been kind of like an interesting subject for me because, like, in a lot of ways, I understand him being upset by it, but
yeah,
personally, like, I'm like, the personal responsibility with a lot of people, I don't think is like, yeah, you can be influenced with something, but usually when somebody does something bad, they'll find any kind of influence to make them want to do it.
Yes, yeah. There was something else going on there other than they read this book. Right?
Yeah.
Like there was, that wasn't the sole cause. I agree. I don't know. I think I'm just torn because on the one hand, yeah, you can't just read a book or watch a movie or play a video game and be like, oh no, that's why I did this horrible thing. Like, no, you did that horrible thing. On the other hand, I know that I tend to be very emotionally influenced by things that I read or watch or listen to. And they would never cause me to go out and make a decision like that, but I can see how maybe if you were leaning that way, then that really did push you along, right? It gave you that last little bit of whatever needed to happen. So I'm kind of torn about that. What it made me think of, though, is in high school, I was friends with a kid who, his name was Ben. Yeah, it was Ben. And we had to do for the Virginia SOL, which was the state testing, the standards testing. It had not come out yet when I was in high school, but we were sort of a trial group for it. And so we did a writing assignment. And the assignment was write about what you're going to leave. You know, you're a senior in high school. What is going to be your parting gift to your class? And we were the class of 2000. And then he wasn't even a dumb guy, but in this case, he was such an idiot. And he wrote about how he would leave 2,000 bombs in the school, where he would place them, you know, who he would want to go after. And it wasn't that long after Columbine, and it was just, he would never, ever, ever do that. It was his stupid, like, this sounds funny. I don't want to do this writing test. No one's going to read it anyway. I'm going to write this, you know, fiction. Then he wore an ankle bracelet his entire senior year. So,
Yeah.
that
Well,
did not turn out for him.
I know, like, if not that I was like planning anything or anything like that, but I know if they'd gotten hold of a lot of my journals and the stories I was writing when I was like in high school and stuff, they would have probably like locked me up somewhere.
Yeah. Oh no, it was same with me. Like just some of the content, they would have been concerned about my mental health. I just was, experimenting with what then has now become like a true crime podcast kind of obsession. But, or not elementary school, in middle school and high school, it would have been upsetting. If I had taken something like that from a student when I was a teacher, I would have been concerned.
It makes me want to ask a question if you would know this, and you probably don't know with the way the internet is. Do y'all have a lot of young followers for your podcast?
I don't know. I know that the people that I interact with tend to be closer to our ages, so like late 20s to 40s-ish range. I know that there are some podcasters that we've exchanged reviews and listens and that kind of thing with that are maybe like mid-20s. And I know that my mother had my nephew, who is 13, listen to it. But it's marked on everything as like explicit. So my hope is that we don't. I mean, not that I don't, like, we're not giving bad messages, but I just feel like it's kind of rough stuff for kids.
I was just curious because like we were talking about, like when I was young, I was really into like stereotypical morbid loner kid and all that stuff, and I just wonder like the stuff that we got away with in a way by it not being open because we were like either reading a book or writing in a journal somewhere that somebody had to actually physically get a hold of. These kids can be tracked almost online by what they look at online and what they listen to and everything else. So their lives might look worse or look more disturbing, but they just didn't know how we were then.
Right. Yeah, there's just no paper trail for us. Yeah. No, I think that's true. And I honestly, there's not any way to tell, like, through iTunes or anything like that. They don't share any data anyway, but even if they did, they don't know who their listeners are necessarily. But if we do have a lot of younger listeners, they are not reaching out in our, kind of hokey mom kind of Facebook group we've got going on. So.
The mom crime crazy.
Pretty much. We like to think we're cool, but we know better.
Wait until your kids start podcasting, and then they'll be like, "Mom, time for the young people."
That's right. Well, my 5-year-old and I do an occasional podcast together called Tobin Talks, and he tells me about his video games, and then I try to edit it to make it more interesting. So it's only a matter of time.
So what do we got next?
All right, Martin Amis, which I believe is how you say his name, or Amos, I'm not really sure. Invasion of the Space Invaders. If you have never heard of Martin Amis, don't feel bad. Just means you're an uncultured, semi-illiterate... Apparently I'm an uncultured semi-illiterate, at least according to The Times, who rated him number 19 on the list of the 50 greatest British authors since 1945. His father, Kingsley Amis, was number 9, meaning the old guy can literally claim to be twice the author his son is. These days, Martin writes serious books and gets into pissing matches with other authors about things like radical Islamism, which is probably why he's not eager to claim credit for the 1982's Invasion of the Space Invaders, an addict's guide to battle tactics, big scores, and best machines. It's exactly what it sounds like, a guide to early video games that Amos is extremely reluctant to discuss or even acknowledge writing. Hard to imagine since it boasts an introduction by Steven Spielberg and is filled with fantastic bon mots like, "Do I take risks in order to gobble up the fruit symbol in the middle of the screen? I do not, and neither should you. Like the fat and harmless saucer in Missile Command, the fruit symbol is simply there to tempt you into hubristic sorties. Bag it. And Pac-Man player, be not proud nor too macho. You will prosper on the dotted screen." A reporter once suggested to Amos, probably in jest, that this was one of the best things he'd ever written, and then noted, "The expression on his face, with perhaps more pity in it than contempt, remains with me uncomfortably." That's awesome. I kind of want to read it. It sounds really epic.
Well, a lot of writers have like a lot of books that people either don't know about, like stuff that Ghost wrote and stuff like that in the beginning, or stuff that like it's strange. Like my favorite author is Neil Gaiman,
Yes.
and like his first book is really hard to find. It's the Duran Duran biography or autobiography. I always get those confused. But he wrote Duran Duran from the musical '80s group. Like that's like his first thing, and it's so hard to find. Because nobody wanted it, like he embraces it, like he's like no problem with it. But I know a lot of authors that have stuff like that they don't want to have anything to do with.
Right. Yeah. And this one sounds like it's, I mean, I guess it's still nonfiction, which sounds like what he's writing now, but definitely a different topic than what he has to say.
Yeah, you should just embrace that, like.
Right? Well, it doesn't sound like a huge flop either. Like, it's the Stephen King one, okay, I can get kind of the political stuff, whatever. The James Bond one, yeah, that sounds like a total disaster, so feel free to hide. This one's just, not his style anymore? It sounds fine.
Yeah, I think so. It's like the thing where some people, like movie actors and like movie people, always say like, "Oh, that thing I did and it's awful and it sucks and it's like terrible," and it's like, why are you crapping on that thing you made?
Right.
I don't get that. Like when people do stuff like that, it's why I was always told I was a bad reviewer when I used to review stuff. It's because people would be like, "You like most things."
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
No, I mean, I can see that. That's not a good critic. It's a good person. I would want you to read all of my stuff, but ultimately, it probably wouldn't make me any better of a writer, right?
Yeah. And like when I write stuff, like I've always had ability, and it's probably what keeps me from totally like ever stopping. It's like I'll like something in almost everything I've written.
Yeah.
So I might write a book, and I'll be like, "Oh, I remember this one part of it. I love that one part. That one part was really good, even if the rest of it was awful."
Right.
So like, I can get like some authors and some creators not liking stuff, but like totally distance themselves from it.
Yeah.
I don't really identify with that too much.
Yeah.
But I'm not a perfectionist either, so.
You're more adventurous than that.
Yeah, I just like make stuff and move on from it.
Right. Well, and so I wonder if it would feel any different if, like, tomorrow somebody found one of your books and you became wildly successful and, like, internationally famous. If that would make you feel any different about the works that you've done that you're not as proud of.
Well, that would be interesting to know. I know, like, about 3.5 years ago, I had somebody that wanted to. It wasn't a big press, but they wanted to publish some of my works.
Mhm.
And they didn't want to, like, give a big money or anything like that or anything. They wanted, like, share profits and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And I was fine with that. I didn't have any problem. Their problem was they wanted me to pull everything I've done offline.
Gotcha.
Because they didn't want any of that to be online, and I said no. I didn't want to do that. Because that's my stuff. That's stuff I worked hard on. And that's stuff where I can see from the very first thing I did, either whether it's the first book or the first podcast, I think I've improved through it.
Yeah.
And me not being able to see that would be bad for me. It's important to me to be able to see that progress.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I go back and forth with our earlier episodes of Crime Crazy, because now that we've figured things out and we got our sound under control and we've gotten better at the research and the editing and all of that, and we have, not a ton of listeners and followers and all of that, but some, like a consistent number. I go back and forth about, like, do I take down the first 7 or so episodes where the sound quality sucks and the content isn't all that great, and we obviously didn't know what we were doing, just so that nobody listens to those and thinks, well, I'm not going to listen to the rest of this, like, if this is what they're doing? Or do I leave it up because that's part of our story? And that's that's sort of like what I think you're saying, is that, like, that's part of our journey. That's part of it. It's not the pretty part, but it's the part of it.
Yeah.
So.
And you're more, I don't want to use perfectionist in a bad way, but you're more picky, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally. Yes. Yeah, I do. I like all of that sort of tedious editing and everything else. Like, I want things that people see to be like what I'm picturing them as, and not just, I'm not brave. I think that's really what it comes down to, is I'm not willing to put anything out there too much. So.
I like working to a point where I'm like, okay, I can't get any better until I do more. Like, that's the way I was with sound equipment. I was like, okay, I'm fine with it, and then I got to a point where I was like, I'm not fine with it, I need to move on to something else now.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where it's like the step for moving on. It's almost like when you're a young writer and you do fan fiction. You do that for a while. That's a learning process. Then at some point, you move on from that, I think. If you want to be like a writer that does more, I think you move on from that in a way. It's like a phase thing. And I'm like that with podcasting or anything else. And that's why I don't mind having that stuff out there. But I do know podcasters have deleted their early episodes totally off.
Yeah, I'm just so torn, because I feel like we reference our cases and we talk about the content of those early episodes, so I don't want it to not make sense. Plus, it feels inauthentic. Like, I am not saying by any means that we are, like, incredibly amazing now. I'm pretty proud of what we're putting out, but, like, whatever. But we sucked a lot in the beginning. It was rough. So I think for now, though, it's part of that journey, right? It's like where we came from. That's where it's going to be. So.
Well, it's like when you have, like, when I do an interview and it's not great audio or anything. One, I think it would be a waste of that person's time if I just deleted it or something like that.
Yeah.
And two, like, most of the time there's something I think it's important in there, even if the quality is not great and stuff. And somebody could learn from me.
Yeah.
Like, why did this happen? What did you learn as you went through? And I'd be like, well, I learned to do this. I'm still learning how to do my mics and, like, the board and all that stuff. Like, the board thing confuses me. There's too many buttons everywhere.
Oh my god, so many knobs. Same thing. I actually went into a shop recently. It was a guitar shop, but they had a bunch of audio equipment, and they had the one that I've got, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do with it. I think it should be able to do it. I can't figure it out. They explained it to me. I had it. I went home. I tried it. No. So many words.
Well, I was using my Yeti mic forever before I found out that the Skype recorder had to be set to the Yeti mic or it wasn't recording it, so it wasn't even using it.
Oh, no. You were like, man, this doesn't sound as good as I feel like it should. Oh, that's super tragic. All right, ready for the next one?
Yep.
By the way, there is no way we're making it through this list.
No.
All right, number 7, Don DeLilio, Amazons. And I'm going to read, I'm going to read what it says on the cover of the book. So this is an intimate memoir of the first woman ever to play in the National Hockey League. Don DeLilio is a renowned author and playwright, part of the postmodern literature movement in the U.S. In recent years, noted critic and pretentious guy Harold Bloom described him as one of only 4 living American novelists who are still writing and deserve our praise. Be that as it may, the one book of DeLilio's that you would probably enjoy the most is the one that is the only one you won't find on his official list of published works. That would be The Amazons, which DeLillo co-wrote in 1980 after a string of 6 well-reviewed but financially disappointing novels. A humorous faux autobiography, Amazons tells the story of Cleo Birdwell, the first woman to play hockey in the NHL, which apparently largely consists of sleeping with your coaches and teammates. By all accounts, it's actually pretty funny, but DeLilio's never publicly not acknowledged writing the book and specifically asked to have it left off his official bibliography. Which is a shame, because if more award-winning geniuses took occasional breaks from their serious works to do something funny and lowbrow, the other 99% of us would probably pay more attention to the rest of their stuff. I just think that, who wrote this article? Let's see. I read it at the beginning. Drew Anderson, I would like him to write a book. This is very amusing to me.
I have to say I don't even remember reading anything about like any first woman to play like professional hockey. Like I've known like the first baseball player, female baseball players, basketball players, even football players, but never like hockey.
Yeah, no, I hadn't really given it a thought. So this will just totally alienate our half of our listeners. I don't, and maybe you, I'm not sure. Hockey and football, I feel like women should be smarter than to play those. We should just leave that to the guys who want brain damage for the rest of their lives. But I don't know anything about it. I do think it's pretty badass to like want to play with men and know that you're going to get super hurt and not be accepted and everything else, although it sounds like this heroine did not so much go that route, but
yeah, like it's interesting thinking of it that way. Like, be smarter.
yeah, well, that's like one of my rules with my kids, right? That Tobin is allowed to do whatever he wants in life. If he wants to dance, he can dance. If he wants to play soccer, he can play soccer. But like football and hockey are out. And I realized I just moved to the wrong part of the country for hockey to be out, but hockey's out. He has a wonderful brain and I love it, and he is not allowed to ruin it. So.
It's pretty like baseball. I mean, like football and hockey's. I mean, pretty brutal. Like, there's no like getting around that point.
No. Yeah, well, and I think Wine and Crime talked about they did an episode about traumatic, what is it? I'm not going to be able to remember the acronym right now, but like when you get all of the concussions over and over and over again, it eventually damages your brain and you end up with something, sort of Parkinson's-like or whatever else. Traumatic brain encephalopathy, I think. Anyway, the statistics on football players at all levels who have this brain damage, it's like almost 100%. It's really, really bad. So, and it depends on what position you play, but that seems like a really big risk.
Yeah, it is like huge. Did you see the study about like soccer players though?
I bet that's probably not any bad. I said soccer, and then I was like, no, maybe baseball.
Well, because of hitting the ball with your head,
Yeah,
and everybody knows
yeah.
soccer balls aren't soft;
No.
they're hard. And I guess because in some places they're talking about taking that headers out from like little like the pee wee versions of like soccer and stuff because of the header that doing head injuries because you just don't think about it. But like for somebody like I had a bad concussion when I played sports in high school once. Like don't remember a couple of days and all that stuff. Like, but they say that one of those is really severe. That's like a really severe bad concussion when you get one of those. But even like 10 years ago, there was probably people in professional sports that would get, 10 of those a year. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, Troy Aikman, the kind of famous football player who used to play for the Dallas Cowboys, said he had to basically relearn how to write at one point. And that's scary when you think about it.
It is. It's crazy. I don't.
And now they're thinking it's causing stuff like not only suicide rates in like professional athletes, like when they did studies on like professional athletes that ended up killing people. They've learned that they
Yeah.
had the same thing in their brains and stuff, and it's like, that's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not my thing. There are lots of things that I know that I do that are risky and unhealthy, and ultimately we're all going to die, but I just don't love those sports at all. And so certainly not enough to make it part of that risk. So.
Well, yeah, and you gotta think, like, even like when we were younger, professional athlete being almost knocked out, and they used to make videos of that all the time. They used to sell them. Sports Illustrated, they used to sell, like, you would get the greatest knockout to the NFL.
Yeah.
And now, like, they're like, whoa, no, we're protecting them. It's like, you can't really protect them in a sport like that.
Right. Yeah. No, there's not any amount of helmet that's gonna keep your brain from jostling around inside your skull when you hit it really hard.
I don't think we've talked in a while, so we've talked a lot.
It's true. I was trying to remember why we got on the topic of sports, but I got it. I'm back. All right, so keep going?
Yeah.
All right, number 6. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, most of his poetry. As the name implies, Dante Rossetti was born into the artistic lifestyle. His uncle created the modern vampire story, his siblings all became writers, and his wife, Elizabeth Siddall, was the prominent artist's model, posing for Ophelia and other works. Dante himself founded a prominent artistic movement, but between painting and writing poetry, also found time to sleep with plenty of women. Surprisingly, Elizabeth was not down with this. Chicks, right? And her husband's infidelities contributed to her depression and possible intentional laudanum overdose. Rossetti was devastated, but his response was just a bit extreme. He slipped a notebook full of poems he had been readying for publication into Siddall's hair in her coffin and then had it buried with her. Which is creepy, but slightly romantic if you squint hard enough, except unlike some of the others on this list, Rossetti eventually changed his mind, and if you think you know where this is going, congratulations on being right. Yes, several years later, he had Siddall exhumed to recover the notebook. While worms had eaten through parts of the pages, you only wish we were kidding, the poems were eventually published, albeit not to any great acclaim. Meanwhile, Rossetti reportedly felt wretchedly guilty over violating his wife's grave for the rest of his life, as one does, and I would add, as one should.
Be like, I forgot I left something in there. I gotta get it back out.
Right? Yeah. It was weird to put it in there, except I kind of get it. Like, okay. I'm good with that sort of sacrifice to try to make up for the shit that he did to her. But it was really weird to get it out. Especially worms had eaten through it. Like, no. Rewrite it.
Mm-hmm. Like, I've written, it's weird when I think about this, I've written, like, stuff one time and given as gifts. Like, you know, that's the only copy, like a hard copy, and then giving it to people for gifts. And, like, that stuff's probably, like, been thrown away because we all know people throw away cards and everything like that. So I wonder, like, what did he just click in his head one day and be like, you know those poems I wrote that time? Those were really good poems. I gotta go get them.
I'm gonna have my wife, whose death I might be responsible for in some part, dug up so I can take back the gift I gave her. Yeah. No. Also, I mean, I get that you can't reproduce something that you created years ago and have it be the same, whatever. But I feel like in this case, maybe like try to remember some of those ideas and create something new. Go from there.
Yeah, and I yeah.
All right, number 5. Hergé, Tintin in the Land of the Soviets. When it comes to a Tintin book kept under wraps, everyone thinks the same thing. Tintin in the Congos, where everyone's favorite Belgian reporter engages in casual racism and slaughters half the animals in Africa. But as uncomfortable as that volume is to modern eyes, writer-artist Hergé had no problem with updating and reissuing it later alongside his newer Tintin books. In fact, there's only one of his early works that he refused to redraw to match his later style, the very first Tintin story of all, In the Land of the Soviets. But why? Mainly because the first couple Tintin stories were forced on Hergé by his editor, an ultra-conservative priest who wanted to educate kids about things like the evils of communism. And by educate, we mean make a bunch of stuff up. Hergé took everything he knew about Russia from one sensationalist book aimed at criticizing the communist regime. Due to some of the extreme examples depicted, things like fake factories designed to trick people into thinking industry is strong, and elections held at gunpoint, Hergé would later call the story a transgression of my youth. Ironically, historians would later note that his depictions were pretty accurate to how terrible living conditions in Russia actually were at the time. Regardless, Hergé kept Tintin in the Land of the Soviets off shelves for years, only relenting when bootleg copies began flooding the market, because you might as well get paid, right? Even then, he would only allow the original, crude, black and white strip to be reprinted without any colorization or updating, although we'll be mightily disappointed if some fanboy isn't working on that even as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, the Tintin books are a weird history of themselves with, like, the racism and everything.
But, right. Wasn't there a movie recently?
Yeah, they did, like, Steven Spielberg did a movie. It had, like, Simon Pegg and them doing the voices of it and stuff.
Yeah.
It was actually really good, I thought. The Tintin books are good, and they made an animated series in the 80s that was really good. But they have the books have a lot of problematic stuff in it, like racism. And he's traveling all over the world, so, like, there's ones where he goes to, like, China, and it's very racist portrayals and stuff.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
But, like, the whole thing about, like, kind of, the gist of it is, like, that he made up stuff about the countries, right?
Right.
That doesn't seem like it's even that big of a deal for writers, because don't most writers do that? I mean, you should do research, but most writers don't do research that much. They just kind of make it up.
They just wing it, yeah. Sound authoritative and keep going.
Yeah, I mean, like, how many times have you read a book and, like, if you're like me and you go and look up something and you find out, like, oh, it's nothing like that.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I am actually, well, I can think of like 15 examples all at once. I can't figure out where to start. I'm currently listening to a book when I ride the bus every day, which is an adventure all its own, but about the Colonial Parkway killings. And it's really interesting to hear things that I have been told by authority figures and by articles and all of that kind of stuff. Like, this is the truth. And then to go back and hear, well, this is what the police report says, and this is what the eyewitness says. And, like, I think a lot of times people just, if you speak with confidence, that becomes the truth. So I get that, but I still think it's socially responsible to be like, hey, actually, I know for a fact that that was only done to damage people.
Yeah, and, like, I think, like, I've always said with people, like, they're like, do you research your stories much? And I was like, I research up to the point where I find interest in the things I'm using. Like, it's almost like in today's age, it's harder to do this, but they used to do a lot of stuff, like, even, like, say, Marvel Comics. When they created the Incredible Hulk, they had gamma rays mutating. We all know, if you know anything about gamma rays, they're not that big of a deal. They're not that bad for you and stuff. They wouldn't mutate somebody into a Hulk.
Into the Hulk, right?
Yeah. But
I mean, very few things would.
Yeah. But back then, they used to take little science things. They'd borrow it. It sounded neat. So they would use it for stuff. It's the same thing with, like, nuclear energy. They used to use it like that a lot. Like, and stuff, but that it would not actually do. It wouldn't make a giant ant or anything like that.
Right.
And I just wonder, like, was it a different time when he wrote this that they were expecting novels to do differently, or I don't know. It just seems kind of odd to me that because I read so many books where there's nowhere near close to being what it is, especially when it comes to
Yeah.
location and cultures.
Yeah.
And we fetishize cultures, especially here in the U.S. We look at other cultures and it's automatically savage, or it's exotic, and and most places are just as boring as where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and they're just their own thing. Like, that's
Yeah.
somebody else's normal. Yeah. No, I can see that. Maybe it is just intent. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
not
I
that
think
it's
it's different.
inaccurate, but that it was mean.
Yeah, like you said, with your talking about that nonfic, it was a nonfiction book, right?
The Parkway?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
something like that, and like you're writing. So when you write nonfiction, I think you automatically are saying like this is the truth.
Yes. Yeah.
So in a way, like that's a little bit different than fiction, I think. I mean, even if you dramatize that, you're still making a fictional account of a real event. So in a lot of ways, you would still be kind of held to more facts than normal.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah. And so in this case, like that's what he was doing, right? Was saying this is how it is.
And
Except that it's fiction, but
those books back then were kind of used as a. It's almost like the Ripley's Believe It or Not. Like he wrote about some stuff and like did accounts of stuff that wasn't true, because it was almost like here's this land, this, and Tintin was almost like that too in a way. It was like travel to here or to there, and he wasn't presenting it as the facts of it.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. All right. I do think it's interesting though that his like the one that he won't update and fix and redo is this one. But other ones he was willing to go through and make it less horrible and
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think some of the changes they made to some of the Tintin books weren't good in another way, because it like probably prob it's getting like problematic stuff uh can be used as an education. So if you don't hide
yeah.
it, you can use it as an education thing. But them going back, and I think what they did, some of them I could be mistaken.
Ooh, sorry, hang on one sec. All right, go ahead. I'm gonna mute myself.
I think in some ways they used to like in these newer editions of some books they would actually take characters darker skin, and that they would just lighten the skin, and then they would say that's fixing it, or they would take them out and make them like white characters. I don't think it's really good because it's not educating people the way things were, and we don't remember that
Right.
that the literature
Yeah.
used to be this way. I took a history of television class when I was in school, and I don't know if you know the a really old TV show, The Honeymooners.
I have heard of it. I just haven't ever seen it or anything.
And they had like a famous line where he would say, you know, bang zoom to the moon, and he's basically saying he's going to knock his wife out.
Right. Right.
And they talked about how like that show's never shown on TV anymore. And it's like, is that a good thing that it's never shown on TV anymore, or should we show it and then talk about the issue of like, well, this was appropriate then, it was okay then, this was a joke, it was used a lot in literature and in TV and stuff then. Is it better just to erase it? Because I think in a way, like what people are doing with some stuff is they just want to erase it, and that doesn't help us.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's sort of sanitizing history and being like, no, we never did that. No one's had to overcome that. Yeah, that's an interesting point too. I feel like for such a lighthearted topic as I thought this one was going to be, we're having some deep conversations, and I have a lot of thinking to do after this. All right. Let's see. Number 4, Nikolai Gogol, Dead Souls 2 and 3. These days, a guy named Nikolai Gogol could only be a Russian mobster or a video game boss, and really, Dead Souls sounds exactly like a first-person shooter. But 150 years ago, it was also an acceptable writer's name. In fact, Gogol was one of Russia's most influential authors, going on to inspire the only two other Russian writers you've ever heard of. Oh God, I cannot say these names. I know them, I hear them, I cannot say them. Nabokov and you should jump in and help me out here.
Yeah,
Dostoevsky?
Yeah, Dostoevsky.
Okay. I can hear it in my head, and my lips will not make that sound. He was already famous when he penned his masterpiece, Dead Souls, a modern updating of Dante's Divine Comedy. Despite being hailed as his greatest work, Gogol saw it as a pale introduction to the great epic poem which is taking shape in my mind and will finally resolve the riddle of my existence. He intended to write a complete trilogy that would prompt social reform and actually save Russia from itself, because writers like melodrama. So what happened? Zealotry, plain and simple. While working on the sequel, Gogol came under the sway of Matvey, somebody whose last name starts with a K, a fanatical priest who convinced him that his creative work was an abomination to the Lord. Thus, on the evening of February 24th, 1852, Gogol burned the nearly complete manuscript of Dead Souls 2 and any notes he had made for the 3rd volume. Only a few scraps escaped the flames. He then immediately ceased eating and died 9 days later, proving that you don't have to be mentally unbalanced to destroy your life's work, but it helps.
Well, this actually reminds me, going back to the thing we were talking about, people deleting their work online.
Mm-hmm.
I know people who have writer's wheels, which it's good for creative people to actually have, because it lets people know who owns this, who's the executive of your works. I know people who's put it in theirs that they want everything deleted.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, I don't know.
Would you want would you want all Crime Crazy deleted?
Crime Crazy, no. But I feel like that's already out there. Some of those NaNoWriMo things and letters and journals and things that I've kept, it's not so much that I care about it for me, but I wonder if it wouldn't be better if just my family didn't ever have to read it, or I'm not a terribly interesting person, and nobody's going to publish it and make a big deal out of it, right? So it's really a non-issue. But I wonder if there are some things that I have written that I wouldn't want my children to read, and then.
Well, let's turn the thing you said earlier. If you were a famous writer and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you had stuff unpublished, would you want it to be published after you died?
I think that I probably would have a couple of categories of work, because I feel like I would still have those things that I wrote just for me, that I never intended anyone to see, and I wouldn't want them to get out there because I wouldn't want to hurt other people. And then I would probably have things that I had written that I wasn't yet proud of, and that I don't care. Yeah, go for it. Publish it. Show everybody. That's the process. That's where it came from. Sort of my private journals that I wrote because I needed an outlet, versus the first 10 episodes of Crime Crazy, which just kind of sucked, right? I'm okay with the I'm not proud of it, but I do think writing is very much an outlet for me. And there are things that I need to write to get out of my head that I don't want anyone else. It would hurt other people, right? They're not even things I really believe or really mean. It's just something I had to get out. So that I do. I think I would like that stuff to disappear.
I know,
the embarrassing crap, I don't care.
I know, one of the reasons why writer's wheels became a big thing was actually the state of people like Gene Roddenberry. Because when he died, and Tolkien and other people, their families took all their little notes and all their little things and started making like TV shows, movies, other books out of them.
Yeah. See, but then I'm torn because, like, Douglas Adams and, there are people who died before I was ready for them to stop writing. And if there's anything that they have, I want to hear it.
Yeah, Douglas Adams
So as
is
a
like
consumer of it, yeah.
he's like my favorite writer, and he wrote I think 6 fictional books or something like that. Like
Yeah,
not many
half
at
of
all.
it. Yeah.
And he had a book published after like Settlement of Doubt, which basically had all that stuff,
Yeah.
all his notes and everything together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of one of those things where I think if I were him, I would be good with that because, it wasn't maybe finished, but that's the only problem with it.
Yeah. It's interesting when you think about it. Like, would you want your kids to be part of your legacy or their own?
Oh, I guess that's true. But I'm not sure that you can't be both.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not sure. All right, so we have just about reached this hour mark. Do we want to do one more?
We can do one more, and I'll put it on the extra thing.
Okay. All right. Mark Twain, 1601. You may be wondering what Mark Twain, a man known for holding absolutely nothing sacred, could possibly have written that he would want to bury. A story about incest? A cookbook for human flesh? The reality is almost disappointing. A bunch of fart and sex jokes. 1601, conversation, as it was by the social fireside in the time of the Tudors, is a pastiche that Twain wrote to try his hand at archaic writing and to skewer those who believed the Elizabethan era to have been some time of strict propriety. It chronicles fictional fireside chat between Queen Elizabeth, several noblewomen, Shakespeare, Sir Walter Raleigh, and others. To give you an idea of what we're dealing with, here's a sample line. In ye heat of you talk it before... Oh, good Lord. It's about breaking wind and yielding an exceeding mighty and distressful stink that everybody laughed at. Okay, so not as most mature story, but why publish it anonymously and wait 26 years before acknowledging authorship? At one point, Twain was apparently proud of 1601, writing to a friend, "For between you and me, the thing was dreadfully funny. I don't often write anything that I laugh at myself, but I can hardly think of that thing without laughing." Of course, years later, he would say, "If there's a decent word findable in it, it's because I overlooked it, so take your pick." Written in between his two best-known works, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, it's like Twain didn't want potential bad press over a relatively minor story to cast a negative light on his recent and upcoming masterpieces. Probably smart, since 1601 was considered unprintable by mainstream publishers from 1880 all the way until the early 1960s, when Elizabethans making jokes about pubic hair became more socially acceptable. I think that one is just fantastic.
Yeah.
I agree with the reasoning. Like, it does sound like, hey, let's save this for a more appropriate time and not mess up my actual writing career, but at the same time, like, it's just kind of fun.
But didn't Benjamin Franklin publish books on like farts and stuff?
Yeah, I think so.
It's good enough for Benjamin. It's good enough for me.
I'm currently living with a almost three-year-old next week, and her brother who is 5, and their brother who is 19, and it is nothing but fart jokes in my house. So I feel like this would fit in very well on our bookshelf.
And then the older ones are teaching the younger ones, right?
Oh, so much so. Yeah. And
So-
they think it's funny when they get in trouble.
Well, the Mark Twain, like, I like Mark Twain. I'm not a huge Mark Twain fan, but like, it makes me want to seek that book out and maybe read it.
Yeah. I know that Twain is very
problematic. Like there's a lot of, well, it's sort of like you were talking about the Tintin books, right? There is a lot of overt racism in Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, and other works, but I do really enjoy.
Are you a fan of the classic Valiant comics? Do you miss Magnus meeting up with Fry? Do you remember when Solar was doing adult things with EXO? Well, okay, no, that didn't happen. But you just never know what could have happened in the Valiant book in those days. From issue to issue, it was the best comics company going. So, if you've ever dreamed in Barry Windsor Smith pencils, you might just want to check this out. I Wish I Was Brave on Tin Pod Radio.